Hi, thank you for watching What's Happening. My name is Kate McMahon and I am your host today. And I'm very excited to introduce you to Peter Martin. He is actually curating an exhibit at Cape Cod Museum of Arts beginning at the end of the month called Paper Talks. Hi, Peter. Great to have you here today.
Good morning, and thank you for hosting me.
Absolutely. So, Peter, a little bit about yourself before we talk about the exhibit. You are an artist and an educator. Can you share your background a little bit with our audience?
Okay, well, I graduated from Bridgewater State College with a master's in special education and a minor in art, and taught at the Dennis Yarmouth Regional School District for some 25 years, from the early 70s into the late 80s, and then I taught 10 years further here in Mattapoisett. And I was a special education teacher in mostly at the DY High School. And then here in Mattapoisett, I actually had the opportunity to teach. I was a special education teacher, but I also taught in biology and offered a co-taught class where I taught art within a biology class as an alternate assessment for students who didn't do as well on the real traditional form of testing. But all the years as a teacher, with a minor in art, I managed to either have a studio at home or in a building on the property, and created art all along the way. So I sort of had when I could do it, it was one of the things I loved to do. And I had a couple of galleries on the Cape, the Artful Hand in Orleans, that represented me for a number of years. And then the Artistic Camilla Richmond's gallery in Osterville. And then eventually once I retired from teaching, I sort of went full force and have made it a full-time passion. So.
Awesome. That's great. And today we're going to talk about a woman by the name of Miroslava Pissarenko, who was a longtime artist here on the Cape that you developed a relationship with her. Can you give us a little bit of background?
Sure. It goes back to actually one of my first years teaching at Dennis Yarmouth. I ended up taking a class in Scrimshaw at the high school, taught by Bob Lavery, Tex Lavery, as everyone knows him. He was an art teacher at the high school and antiques dealer on the side as well. And lo and behold, I ended up taking a seat next to this sort of interesting woman who happened to be Miroslava. And through the period of the class, we sort of developed our friendship. And then I learned of her paper cutting. She started one night she was talking about this other art form that she was doing, and that she was developing a small portfolio to send to an exhibit in Chicago. And she brought some of the work in to see at the class, and I was pretty much taken by it. And so then the class ended, and I think we made arrangements to meet one time, or I saw her name in the paper offering a talk on her. She also designed little paper cuts on eggs. So they were I've learned later that they were somewhat traditional, but she sort of twisted it and created her own traditional form of paper cutting, egg decorating. And so I went and attended, I think it might have been in Dennis somewhere. And so one thing led to another, and I started visiting her, and we became friends. And it was a friendship that lasted for some 30 years.
That's awesome. So, can you tell us a little bit about this tradition of paper cutting?
Well, so that was the first I had heard of it. And that was in the class in Scrimshaw. And so because of our friendship, about a couple of years later, well, actually it was in 1980, I was encouraged by knowing the art form from her, and also learned of a program. There was a foundation that it was called the Kosciuszko Foundation, offered summer scholarships for studies in Poland, and I applied for a study in folk art and ethnography in the summer of 1980, which turned out to be quite an exciting summer because it was the summer of solidarity. And so I went for the summer and studied at the University of Nicholas Copernicus and studied folk art. And in that program, I was able to meet traditional paper cut artists from different regions of Poland. The paper cutting has ties to many different places like China and Switzerland, but in Poland, specifically because that was what really inspired Miroslava to start, was the traditional paper cuts, because that's her homeland. She was born and raised in Poland and lived in Paris for 40 some years and then moved to Cape Cod. So when I was there, I learned that paper cutting isn't a universal art form. It's more regional. There's like the Łowicz region and the Lubia region. There's just a couple of regions that strictly do paper cut. So like, for example, one is called Leluya, Tree of Life, which is a very traditional form in one region. And the Łowicz region, they do lots of paper cutting applique, almost multiple colors of layers, whereas the other region used a lot of solitary colors and simple forms. So, and the people in Poland used sheep shears to cut their paper because it was something passed down from the countryside where they would use shears and cut into leather, and eventually they started cutting paper and cutting paper designs and bringing them back to their cottages and decorating, whitewashing, and then putting paper cuts so they could change it up every year. So that, I think I learned later that there's some paper cutting in small regions of Switzerland. They do a lot of more black village scenes, black paper cuts, and then the Chinese have been doing paper cutting for centuries, different styles. So, but predominantly it was the Polish paper cutting that, and in America, and one that people around here might make relationships to, is the silhouettes, because that form, a lot of aristocrat, early New Englanders and American had their silhouettes done. So I think that was another form of paper cut that people around here might make an association to. So from that, Miroslava did some traditional, but then developed her own style. And ironically, through the years, I was so intrigued by it with my minor in art, I started to develop my own style of paper cutting, which I'm still quite involved. I'm cutting in mass sizes from 12 feet to 5 feet, but using Tyvek at times too. So
Excellent, excellent. So, why did you decide to curate this exhibit for the museum?
well, over the years, our relationship, I mean, Miroslava was really quite a woman of intrigue. She had an interesting personality, that she was the type of person that, because she had a lot of life experiences living in Poland, living in Paris, but even here in America, she was sort of the type of person that if she went somewhere, she always brought a little bit of that back to her own home. So on Cape Cod, she created almost her own colorful world that had bits and pieces of everything that she did, so that if she traveled somewhere, she was more likely to bring back seeds from a garden. That's something she thought was really, she'd sort of, grab seeds or cuttings from, if it was close by, she'd grab cuttings, or if, she'd bring shells home, bones from the beach or the desert. She always brought something back and sort of fueled her creativity and made her it was a really enchanting world that she made for herself. And I always told her that when I visited her, I said, it's like, I feel like I've gone to another country. Can't put my finger on it, but I feel like every time I visit you, I've sort of almost felt I needed a passport to get in and go out. But that's how interesting she made her life, and anybody who came into it with her, you felt that around her. So as the years went on, she had created quite a collection of wood carvings and eggs, decorated eggs and paper cuttings. And I think she really had hoped that maybe a wish, maybe it was a fantasy or a romantic wish, was that somehow she could have a place that she could share all of these creations that she had made. And it was just not happening. So she entrusted me with her collection. And I had hoped that someday, that maybe in the future, that I could make that happen for her. And so after I had an exhibit in 2019 at the Cape Cod Museum of Art on Moby Dick with my large-scale Tyvek and paper cuts. I thought, well, you know what, this might be the opportunity. This might be the time to finally find a home for her collection, because she had she had a lot of ties within the Mid-Cape and Lower Cape areas. So I thought so that's where I'm heading with this idea, is that maybe this could be home for her collection down the road.
Well, that's wonderful that you've kept that in mind, and were able to fulfill it.
Yeah, well, I think what I'd like, what I'm hoping is that when people visit the museum, they're able to get a little bit of that feeling, how they can imagine just what it was like maybe visiting her. I mean, there are a lot of things that it'd be great to bring in and fill the room with a garden, because that was her other vocation. She actually studied how to do seed propagation in France as a younger woman. And so till into her 90s, she was still saving seeds and freezing them and starting seedlings. And so her garden had something blooming almost year round, even on Cape Cod, from the early snowdrops to the crocus to primroses by the hundreds. And so I'm hoping that this exhibit will sort of give people, tell the story of Miroslava and her creative senses, and maybe they'll feel that when they visit it.
That's wonderful. That's awesome. So, the exhibit will open at the end of January and is going to run until late March or early April. So, what we want to suggest is that you visit the museum website for the exact dates, and that is ccmoa.org or Cape Cod Museum of Arts if you just want to do a Google search. So, Peter, I want to thank you again for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to visiting the exhibit.
Oh, it's great. I hope to see you there. And I know the museum's doing a great job at keeping everybody safe and organized, and there is a lot of room. And this, so it's exciting, and soon it'll be on the walls of the museum.
Wonderful. Congratulations on this accomplishment.
Oh, thank you again.
My name is Kate McMahon, and I want to thank again Peter Martin for joining us today for What's Happening, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, Peter.
All righty. Bye-bye.